Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, June 2nd, 2024, and today we're going to be taking a look at an updated 2024 Senate election projection. My last one I made was on May 17th, 2024, and now we are 2 days post-conviction of Donald Trump on 34 counts. Guilty of a felony, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. The Senate races here, while it may not be directly related to the presidential race, will certainly have some impact of this recent decision from Donald Trump's jury of his peers, the decision there to now convict him of these felonies. We are ultimately finding that the Senate race map definitely deserves a revitalized look. The presidential map changed yesterday when I made my projection compared to where it was a month ago, and I'm certain that there is at least some marginal impact from what we have seen with the decision in yesterday's or 2 days ago from the court there. And something that I think we really need to understand too is, while yes, the presidential races and Senate races are in theory separate, we often find that in 2020 and 2016, the down ballot Republicans tend to actually do better than Donald Trump does on the national level. And so a lot of it for them is about outrunning him in a lot of these battleground states, outrunning him in the, by 2, 3, 4 points, and not allowing those states to be even more lopsided in favor of the Democratic Party compared to where they were back in 2020. And so it's a very interesting game here for Republicans. You often find that Republicans are carried, or any down ballot candidates are carried across the finish line by the presidential ticket here, but I do not think that is necessarily going to be the case. And of course, there are exceptions to the rule here. There are going to absolutely be Senate races where we might find Democrats outperforming Joe Biden, and quite substantively. And so I think Republicans are really trying to reel it on back, expand Trump's lead in these battleground states. So because Democrats have that built-in cushion in some of these states, especially with popular incumbents, for example, a state like Pennsylvania, where right now Trump is up by 2 points in the polls, but Bob Casey is up by 9, that's an 11-point delta between the two. And so Democrats are going to try, Republicans rather, are going to try to make Pennsylvania as red as possible on the presidential level so that, Republicans can really outpace. There are other instances, for the exact example that I mentioned earlier on, where I talked about Republicans outperforming Donald Trump. For instance, in a state like Michigan, we may find that Mike Rogers, the eventual nominee, likely to be nominee for Senate in the state from the GOP side, could very well outperform Donald Trump, just as we saw in 2020. Gary Peters, the Democrat there, won re-election by less than 2 points. Joe Biden won the state by roughly 3 points. And so it really just depends on the state. That's why we're doing the Senate election prediction. Post-conviction, there certainly are going to be things that now can be taken into account. My most recent projection especially being probably one of the most important factors here in the fact that I believe now today, June 2nd, 2024, that should the election be held today, Joe Biden wins re-election. And so it's a very different stance that we have taken from where we were over the past 6 months. Consistently from January to now, every projection has said Donald Trump would win re-election. This would be his second term in the White House. I no longer think that to be true. So now we take a closer look at the Senate races, see if anything changes, and also just provide additional commentary. And also, it's the start of what's going to be a very consistent timeline of Senate presidential whatever type of predictions for the 2024 race on a pretty consistent manner now. The presidential race will likely be updated every 2 weeks. The Senate race will probably be updated again in July, then mid-July, then August, then mid-August, and so on and so forth. And so here's our first look at summer 2024 in the final stretch of this very long, seemingly, campaign season, because we've practically known the nominees since 2020, if we're being entirely honest. But ultimately, here's where we are in the Senate. We are nearly 4 minutes into this video. Let's go ahead and start characterizing states. And so easily at the baseline, what we know about maps here and what we know about our beloved, 33, 34 races that are up, roughly 67 to 70% of them just simply aren't going to be competitive in the slightest. Democrats and Republicans aren't going to have to fight for some of these states. They aren't going to have to do anything. They will not even have to lift a finger for certain political parties to win in some of these states. And so right now, that gives Democrats roughly, 28 seats already at baseline that are not up for re-election, Republicans at 38. It's going to show you exactly why this map is largely seen as possibly one of the most advantageous to Republicans in this election year. And you'll see that become very, very apparent as we start to characterize the safe states, that we expect Democrats and Republicans to win in their respective states by over 15 points. So states like Washington and California and Hawaii are easily safe Democratic states. Based on incumbency status and previous election victories, states like Virginia and Minnesota will be amongst that crowd as safe Democratic states. Of course, states like Vermont and Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island and New York and New Jersey and Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, and Maryland here. Now, Maryland, I think, comes in at a unique point because as of today, it seems as if the RNC is more likely than not going to abandon all efforts in there from a national standpoint, largely because of Governor Larry Hogan's recent comment on the trial that we saw Donald Trump became a convicted felon. And you find that Governor Larry Hogan said, we must believe in a verdict like this one. We must believe in our justice system. And so the Trump team and Laura Trump, who is now the RNC co-chair, Chris LaSavita, one of Donald Trump's mainstream campaign members, probably the highest ranking campaign official on the Republican side, these two people came out in full force against Larry Hogan. And it looks like now, and you can actually see this now, articles popping up, Republican allies, Donald Trump allies rather, seem to be signaling that they are declaring war against Larry Hogan, that they will remove any and all efforts from a national standpoint, any and all funding from the RNC, the NRSC. This is going to be a concerted effort from the Trump family, the Trump team here, the RNC co-chair, the Trump campaign, working in unison to tank Larry Hogan, even if it means making Maryland, which in theory might be more competitive as a state, to becoming a solid Democratic state, all with the purpose of getting out Larry Hogan. And so Maryland joins the ranks, and it has been for a little bit, just based on intuition beyond this. But right now, Maryland is a state that is safe Democrat, brings the Democrats to 42. Not the best place to be, given if you are Larry Hogan, right? You would obviously want to be in a more competitive standpoint, especially after this announcement. I think we're at a point of no return. And so that brings Democrats to 42 seats. And so you're thinking, okay, they've just surpassed the Republicans. Genuinely speaking, how bad could it get? And the answer is a lot worse than this map might suggest. At a baseline, Republicans already have 38 seats. No matter what happens, even if they lose every single seat here, it's going to be 38 seats. Which means when you add in the safe Republican seats, you're inching closer and closer and closer to, if Donald Trump is president, the magic number of being 50, or if Joe Biden is president, the magic number being 51. Utah, safe red. Wyoming, safe red. North Dakota, Nebraska, and the Nebraska special election. Missouri, Indiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, West Virginia. Safe, 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 safe red. You want to know what's interesting, though, is that in 2018, the incumbents were Democrats in North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, West Virginia. This time around, Republicans are going to win here. They won in North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana in 2018. Too polarized, not enough there for Democrats in terms of residual support. In West Virginia, it barely went to Joe Manchin. 3 points. This time around, he decided to leave. He's up and he's out. And so West Virginia, easy and automatic Republican flip. Where does that bring us to now? 48 seats. Well, guess what? We talk a lot about incumbency. We talk a lot about candidate quality. Well, here we go. In 2022, we have people like Governor Rick Scott running in states like Florida. And we have people like Senator Ted Cruz running in states like Texas. And so Florida, which is a state that voted for their senator back in 2022, Marco Rubio, by 20 points, their governor by 20 points, Florida, I would characterize as our first state on the map here as a likely Republican state. So based on the safe states alone, Republicans are at 48, meaning out of the remaining toss-ups, they need just 2 if Donald Trump is president and 3 if Joe Biden is president. They already get Florida. Governor Rick Scott is no Marco Rubio. He doesn't run up the numbers amongst minority voters the same way. He doesn't inspire the basis the same way. And he also isn't benefiting from the fact that in 2022, Florida, out of all of the states in the country, had one of the most noticeable Republican waves across the state. So Florida in 2022, very strong for the GOP, strong again in 2024, but not as strong. Florida goes to the Republican Party. And so now we're introducing a new characterization, a rating called likely, where we expect the candidates here to win by anywhere between 5 and 15%, which means that in theory, these states could become more competitive and flip over to the Democratic side. We've seen crazier things happen in American politics, but for these safe states, I really wouldn't touch them. Republicans aren't winning Virginia. They're not winning California. They're not winning New Jersey. Democrats are not going to win North Dakota. They're not going to win West Virginia. They're not going to win Mississippi. These states are Republican and Democrat respectively. Florida is a state that we can guess based on a number of different factors. And that means it's going to be pretty solid for the GOP, but not outside the realm of possibility that Democrats, in some circumstance, could end up winning. Just probably not right now. Another state that I think would join the Republican column as a likely red state is the state of Texas. And so this is really the killer here for Democrats. We're already starting to characterize likely states on the Republican side, and we are already at 50 seats, which means at worst case, if Donald Trump is president, they have a majority of just one seat, the same way that Democrats had it from 2021 to 2023. And so, what we're finding here is that Republicans already come from a point where they really don't need to do much. There are 8 remaining races on the map here, and should they win just one of them, Republicans would be automatically in the majority. But what I want to remind you from 2022 is that never underestimate the Republican Party's ability to lose. Never underestimate the ability to lose victory when it's well within their reach. Because it is well within their reach. If they just wanted to bankroll a state, for instance, like Montana, as they've been trying but not trying well enough, they could throw in $200 million into the state, probably win it, and skate by in the rest of the states. But Republicans here are always adventurous and always trying to go big and bold. Democrats know they're playing defense in all of these states, and they have the resources and the money to do so. Republicans really don't. It seems they're taking a strategy point here, and we'll talk about this in a future video. It seems to be revealed based on ad spending, based on conversations with national chairs, members of the mainstream GOP delegation, that their focus is actually extending only to Montana and Ohio, and really freeing everything else, giving everything else back to the Democratic Party and saying, you know what, y'all can win here. We're going to target these two states. And so Democrats have started to notice that. They've started to match the Republican ad spending in states like Montana and Ohio, which we've only started to see really ramp up over the past month. Republicans have been far behind when it comes down to ad reservations, and probably because a lot of their money is going to legal fees. But you're finding here that Montana and Ohio right now are the prime targets for the GOP. Okay, with that being said, what are the safe Democratic states? I don't want to bore you too much talking just about Republican strategy here. Let's talk about where Democrats know they're pretty solid in. And so that means states like New Mexico, where they have an incumbent here who really isn't at risk of a major challenger, could be a sleeper race in the sense that it would be more competitive than expected, but ultimately Democrats are going to win there. Democrats are also going to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin by pretty strong margins. I think anywhere from 6 to 10 points. Bob Casey Jr. is very popular in Pennsylvania. Tammy Baldwin is very popular in Wisconsin. And arguably speaking, the Republican Party doesn't have the best candidates there. They have Dr. Oz Light in Pennsylvania, and then they have someone who has been embroiled in a significant number of scandals, whether it's attacking elderly voters in, elderly homes. You also find, too, that based on some of the comments he has said, you can tell when somebody is from California in a Midwestern state. You can tell when somebody has decided to carpetbag, and that's exactly what we're seeing happen here, in this state on the Republican side. So Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, sure, could be more competitive because of where, Donald Trump is in the state. I honestly think this is going to be one of those states, though, where Republicans significantly underperform President Trump, largely because Democrats are going to overperform President Biden. It isn't necessarily the fault of these Republican nominees. I think if they were faced up against a stereotypical Democrat, and this was, without any type of incumbency advantage, even for President Biden, I could easily see how these races would be significantly more competitive. But that's just not the case. You're running against tried and tested incumbents, and it's a presidential election year, and Joe Biden and I expect to win Pennsylvania, come within a point of Wisconsin, so I'd say Democrats are starting off pretty strong in the state. That brings them to 45, and that's it in terms of likely red or blue states. We are now down to the lean characterization, which means states that go by anywhere between 1 to 5 points, and that means that these races are truly up for grabs. As a friendly reminder, if Donald Trump wins the presidency, this Senate map is already spoken for. The majority is in the Republican Party's hands, and now it is just down to whether or not Democrats can do defense enough to maintain 50 to 50, so that in 2026, maybe, they could win back Senate control. But there are still 5 toss-up seats here. Republicans, on your screen right now, won 4 out of the 5 states on your map in 2016. In 2020, they won 2 out of the 5 here. They only need 1. And that's assuming that Joe Biden wins re-election. And so you have Michigan, Ohio, 2 states in the Rust Belt region, Montana, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, here's the thing. I think Arizona, despite being a state that Donald Trump is performing well in, and I think this is where you're seeing, again, that residual effect where Republicans are trying to push up the Arizona margin for Trump. So Kari Lake's margin gets brought up with it. I think we're finding that Arizona, with this abortion referendum, could make Arizona become a more, likely blue state. But I do not imagine Ruben Gallego outrunning President Biden by 5 to 6 points. I think we are seeing that right now in the initial polls, but when push comes to shove, I do think Kari Lake still has enough support to bring her close enough, but still yet so far from Washington, D.C. And so Arizona, I'd start off and kick this off by saying I believe it would be a lean blue state. But I'm iffy about it. I think I could certainly see the argument for it being likely. I honestly think, too, what we have found to be a major problem for Republicans in these states is just the fact that the candidates that they run just don't do enough in order to differentiate themselves with President Trump. And so when we talk a lot about these Republicans trying to group themselves together, it isn't without intention. It's not that the Democrats are doing a great job at painting all of these down-ballot Republicans as MAGA lights. They want to be associated with the Trump brand. In many cases have been endorsed by him. And so when he goes down, It's sort of like that Hunger Games reference, right? When he goes down, they go down with him. And so that's really a problem for the mainstream GOP because it's the reason they lost in 2022. It's the reason they lost in some down ballot races in 2020. It's the reason they lost in 2018. The Trump brand in some states, especially in states like Arizona, can absolutely be toxic. And despite what the polls might be saying right now, there's a reason he's not hitting 50%. There's a reason the majority isn't there. Not everyone is behind Biden. That is clear. But right now, Democrats, when you look at the baseline, if Republicans are the MAGA type, as you see with Kari Lake, up against a traditional Democrat like Ruben Gallego, the Democrat wins. The Democrat clears, to be completely honest. He's polling 7 points ahead. I'm underestimating him based on what the polls are telling us. And so right now, Arizona, blue state, Democrats get it. It's up to 46. I will say, though, I don't expect it to be more than 5 points as of right now. But I think I could very much be swayed, especially if more data comes out, more fundraising numbers start to pour in. I think, though, Arizona I'm comfortable keeping as a lean Democratic state. As for the state of Nevada, I want to come back to that one. I think we need to talk about it a little bit more in depth. Montana, we'll talk. Ohio, we'll talk. Michigan, I think is a state we can reasonably say Elisa Slotkin. She's also someone who's tried and tested. She knows how to win in a swing district. She knows how to win across the state. She's more center than I think some Democrats would like, but ultimately speaking, she's electable. She can do what Debbie Stabenow did. She can win. I just don't think by a lot. I think Michigan with an open race, it's always a prime opportunity for the Republican Party. I can't say they have an A-tier recruit. He's not A-tier. He's somebody who had left office and then all of a sudden decided to step back in when they didn't want Peter Meyer as the Republican nominee. And so I see it in a multitude of ways. Right now, I'd say Michigan is a closer state than Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. Ultimately speaking, though, Democrats do pull ahead by roughly 1 to 2 to 3 points. And I think a lot of that is dependent on President Biden's performance in the state. Again, another state I now expect him to win. Didn't expect him to win it a month ago. And so Michigan, lean Democratic state. Now we're down to our final three, and these are probably some of the more important three. Montana, Ohio, 2 states that Donald Trump won twice in 2016 and 2020. Nevada's a bit different. Hillary Clinton won it, Donald Trump won it, and also, looking at the map here, Jackie Rosen, who is the incumbent Democrat in Nevada, won in 2018, 2 years after we saw Hillary Clinton win across the state. She actually outperformed Hillary Clinton, defeated a Republican incumbent by roughly 5 points. And so that is largely the reason why I think that we have Jackie Rosen doing well in this state. I have her at a lean margin, and I think I'm going to keep it there. I think this is a state, though, that could be more on the sleeper side of things because we are very surprised to see some of the data we get out of Nevada, especially on the Trump side. Some of the data is very unrealistic. I genuinely don't believe that Trump is up by 11 points across the state, but I wouldn't be shocked if he won the state and Jackie Rosen won. I think it's very similar to what we saw happen on the governor level in 2022, where, Joe Lombardo was able to win as a Republican governor, and yet Catherine Cortez Masto as the Democrat won on the Senate map, and there were certainly crossover voters, and there had to be. And so Nevada right now, I'd say, is a state where Jackie Rosen is on track for victory. She benefits from the fact that she also is somebody who has tried and tested and knows how to win. I do think, though, depending on where Donald Trump, how well he does, it could actually nudge the Republicans up enough that they end up taking down Jackie Rosen. Now, with that being said, let's enter into our final 2 states, Montana and Ohio. Probably some of the most closely watched states and will be the focus, economically speaking, of all the advertisements, of all the money, of all the resources. These are the real 2 states where it's going to matter for every single cent, every single, point of effort here. Democrats, Republicans are going to probably have, combined over 100 field offices in these 2 states. And honestly speaking, for Montana, it really only gets this much attention because there's a Democratic incumbent, Jon Tester, who knows how to win competitive races, but has never had a blowout. And so he really doesn't have much room to fall. If you shift his margin from 2018 by 3 points, he loses. And so Democrats are doing everything they can to maintain his popularity, maintain his level. Sherrod Brown is the same way, won by 6 in 2018, won by a similar amount in 2012. And so Ohio, Montana don't really have incumbents here on the Democratic side that, are running up the margins, winning by 25 to 30 points, and all of a sudden have their first competitive race they've ever had. That's not the case. That was the case in Missouri and Indiana and North Dakota in 2012. They, steamrolled the Republicans. North Dakota, not so much, but Missouri and Indiana certainly steamrolled the Republicans there, and it didn't set up a good infrastructure to win in 2018. Democrats have it, but so do Republicans, because they've been winning here on the presidential level. Now, my last map, I had them split. Montana went red and Ohio went blue. And I think I'm going to go the same exact way. I will say this, though. I think we will find that Sherrod Brown is going to perform significantly better than President Biden. I mean, the likes of which we have seen are very, very difficult to see in recent elections. We don't have that much crossover vote. I think we are going to have a lot for Sherrod Brown. He's arguably probably one of the best Democratic recruits that they got to remain in the U.S. Senate. It's often you find incumbents decide to vacate office when times get tough, just as we saw neighboring Joe Manchin did in the state of West Virginia. And Ohio isn't West Virginia. It is winnable for Democrats, and I do think Democrats are going to win here. I just don't think it's going to be by any excessive type of margin. I think less than 1 point at one time was, more on the apprehensive side for Democrats. I think given the recent news following the verdict, as much as the Republicans are trying to say that this has no impact on the election, it absolutely does. And I think despite, what they are promising they will do with the Senate map here, Republicans are promising far more than I think they can actually accomplish when it comes down to this election cycle. Ohio is going to be a state that I think I'm comfortable characterizing as lean blue right now. With that being said, though, moving that over more in the left column, I do think Montana shifts over a little bit more conservative. And the reason for that is because although there is a, crap ton of crossover support, Ohio is a state Trump will probably max out at a 10-point victory at best in 2024. That is the most I could see him winning Ohio by in 2024. Montana, on the other hand, is going to be a Trump plus 16, Trump plus 20 state, depending on where we are in November. And so Montana, I think we are going to see a very close election. I think you are going to find that Jon Tester performs significantly better than many other Democrats even could in a race like this one, but sometimes polarization is too great. And in a state like Montana, I think that is going to be true. I could be proven wrong, and I think we will see things pour in over the couple of months. Maybe more scandals will arise. Maybe more money will be focused on the race. Maybe different things will impact it. I really don't know because that's all in the future. But if the election was held today, I would feel confident saying Montana is lean red and Ohio is lean blue. I might be upsetting people by not using the tilt characterization because I normally do in predictions like this one. It honestly gives me a little bit more leeway when I end up being wrong about some of these things. Inevitably, I've never been perfect, and I don't think anybody is on elections like these. But I also do think I feel more comfortable in these ratings today, especially post-conviction, than I did 2 weeks ago. I think this is genuinely where we are on the Senate map. Democrats are going to try tirelessly to maintain Senate control, but sometimes the math just isn't in your favor. Democrats, though, do have a phenomenal effort and a phenomenal showing if this map ends up being true. Holding the fort down in a number of key and crucial states when Republicans really only had to win one and only one, state was actually able to flip, that's good for the Democratic Party. That's a strong standing point, especially going into future elections, because it means the next time that this Senate map arises, chances are Ohio will be the only one next to flip. And so Democrats can build up a buffer, and they can build themselves back up to the majority. And I think that could happen, especially if Donald Trump wins the election and the midterms go for Democrats the way they did in 2018. But a lot of ifs, a lot of speculation, and a lot in the future that can be determined very differently depending on what's happening. And so right now, this is where we are. June 2nd, 2024, snapshot in time, Republicans win the Senate majority, 51-49, by flipping the state of Montana and every other state, and West Virginia. Forget that. And every other state stays the same. Very, very, very close race. A very interesting one at baseline, one that I think is going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars, which is crazy to think about, the amount of money that we now see spent in these battleground states. But that's what it takes in modern America. That's what it takes to win a Senate race. And we will see which party comes out ahead. Right now, my bet's on the Republicans, but only time will tell. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.